The silence in my house had become deafening. After the divorce, every creak of wood beams and every tick of clocks echoed through vast expanses of emptiness. At 35, I found myself alone, tracing fingers absently across cold sheets in a bed that felt too big for just me. My chestnut hair fell in waves past my shoulders as I stared at my reflection each morning, noticing the subtle changes time was etching into my features. A few silver strands here, faint lines there. Despite maintaining my figure through religiously dedicated yoga sessions and morning runs, I felt the hollowness creeping in. My body was still curved in all the right places, my 5'7" frame toned from exercise, but something vital was missing. The house, a modest 3-bedroom I'd kept in the divorce settlement, felt like a museum of memories I couldn't bring myself to pack away. That's when I saw the flyer for the local shelter. Give a forever home, find forever love, it proclaimed in cheerful font that seemed to mock my solitude. Something pulled me there that Saturday morning in October, the autumn air crisp as fallen leaves crunched beneath my boots. The shelter smelled of disinfectant and wet dog, a cacophony of barks echoing off concrete walls. That's when I saw him. A magnificent German shepherd, with intelligent amber eyes that seemed to pierce straight through my carefully constructed walls. His coat was black and tan, slightly matted but still gleaming under the fluorescent lights. He sat with a quiet dignity that stood out among the chaos. That's Max, the shelter worker Jenny told me. 3 years old. He was surrendered by a breeder who fell on hard times. He's incredibly smart, but he needs someone special. As if understanding he was being discussed, Max's ears perked forward, his gaze never leaving mine. When I approached his kennel, he didn't bark or jump like the others. He simply stood, tail swaying gently, and pressed his nose to the chain-link fence. Something in that moment clicked into place. A missing puzzle piece I hadn't known I was searching for. The adoption paperwork felt momentous, like signing for a new life. Jenny helped me gather supplies: a plush bed, premium food, toys, and a sturdy collar. He's been waiting for someone like you, she said with a knowing smile. Some dogs just know their person when they see them. In the soft glow of Max's first morning with me, I could hear his rhythmic breathing beside my bed, which became my favorite alarm clock. Our bond deepened through each passing season. Spring flowers turned to summer storms, then autumn leaves. My initial loneliness transformed into comfortable contentment with his companionship. Those sacred morning walks got longer, more intimate. I discovered a hidden trail leading to a secluded pond where Max could swim freely while I confided my deepest secrets. His powerful body cutting through the water, muscles rippling beneath that glossy coat. I found myself admiring his strength, his unwavering devotion. "You're my guardian angel," I'd whisper as he shook water from his fur, those intelligent amber eyes locked on mine. He'd press his warm body against my legs, tail wagging slowly, as if to say, "I'll never leave you." The dating attempts grew less frequent. Every man sensed Max's intense protectiveness. Tom from yoga class barely made it through dinner before Max's low growls drove him away. Michael, a charming lawyer, lasted 3 dates until that fateful night. We were on my bed, his hands wandering beneath my blouse, when Max's barking erupted like thunder. The scratching at my bedroom door grew frantic, his deep growls mixing with desperate whines. Michael froze. "He sounds serious," Michael stammered, already reaching for his discarded shirt. "He's just protective," I tried explaining, but Max's barking reached a fever pitch. The door rattled in its frame from his determination to reach me. "Look, I should probably go. Call me?" Michael hurried down the stairs, Max's warnings following him out. Once alone, I opened the door to find Max trembling with protective energy. He rushed to cover my face in concerned licks, whimpering as he checked me over. His body pressed close, claiming me, those amber eyes fierce with possessive love. "It's okay, boy, I'm safe," I soothed, burying my face in his thick fur. "You're the only one I need." That night marked a shift. Max's bed moved from the floor to right beside mine. His warm presence kept the loneliness at bay better than any man could. I started declining dates altogether, preferring our private walks and intimate evenings alone. Our morning trail grew more isolated as Max guided me deeper into the woods, his muscular form leading the way, pausing to make sure I followed. Those amber eyes seemed to hold secrets, drawing me further from the world and deeper into our private paradise. Our isolated morning walks became an obsession. Each dawn found us wandering deeper into the woods, Max's powerful body forging ahead while I followed trustingly. His black and tan coat glistened with dew as he marked our private territory. That fateful morning started like any other. The mist hung low between the trees as we explored a new trail. Max's ears suddenly pricked forward, a low rumble building in his chest. Before I could react, a large Rottweiler burst from the bushes, unleashed and aggressive. Time slowed as the dogs clashed in a fury of snarls and snapping teeth. Max's muscles bunched and flexed as he positioned himself between me and the attacker. The sound of their fight echoed through the trees, primal, violent, terrifying. I screamed for help, but we were too far from the main path. The Rottweiler's teeth found Max's shoulder, drawing blood that matted his beautiful fur. But my brave protector fought back fiercely, his powerful jaws and trained instincts prevailing until the other dog finally retreated with a yelp. "Oh God, Max!" I cried, dropping to my knees beside him. He was panting heavily, blood trickling from the puncture wounds, but his first concern was still me. Those amber eyes searched my face as his tongue gently licked my tears away. We hurried home where I tenderly cleaned his wounds in the shower, my hands trembling as I parted his wet fur. Max stood patiently, pressing against my body whenever I started crying again. His warm strength remained undiminished despite the injury. That night, I couldn't bear him sleeping separately. "Come here, boy," I whispered, patting the bed beside me. He leapt up gracefully, his large frame settling against mine as I stroked his fur. The steady thump of his tail against the mattress soothed my lingering fears. "You saved me," I murmured into his neck, breathing in his musky scent. "My brave, beautiful boy." His response was a soft whine as he nuzzled closer, one paw draped possessively across my waist. The intimacy of the moment made me shiver. I'll never forget the night everything changed between Max and me. His wounds from protecting me were healing, but seeing those small scars beneath his thick fur made my heart ache. Each gentle whimper as I tended his stitches tore at my soul. My brave, beautiful boy had risked everything for me. That evening, I couldn't sleep. The moonlight filtered through my curtains, casting shadows across Max's powerful form beside my bed. His amber eyes studied me with that soul-piercing gaze that made me feel completely seen. My fingers trembled as I traced the healing marks on his shoulder. "You've given me everything," I whispered into the darkness. "Let me show you how much I love you." My heart pounding, I crept downstairs to the kitchen. The smooth peanut butter glass jar felt cool in my shaking hands. Returning to our darkened sanctuary, Max's tail thumped softly against the sheets as I settled beside him. His warmth radiated against my skin. That first taste from my fingers made him whimper softly. Such gentle sounds from my fierce protector sent shivers through me. As my confidence grew, I spread more where I yearned for his attention. His warm tongue was so tender, drawing soft gasps from my lips as pleasure built in waves. When release finally crashed over me, it was transcendent, stars bursting behind my closed eyes. Afterward, Max curled protectively around my trembling form. Our hearts beat in perfect sync as I buried my face in his thick fur. No more loneliness, no more emptiness. Just this primal connection that filled every void in my soul. "My beautiful boy," I murmured. "My everything." Our bond deepened beyond ordinary understanding. Each day brought new intimacies, new discoveries. His devotion consumed me until nothing else mattered. Not society's rules or others' judgment. Just us, in our private world of touch and trust. Chapter 6. Divided Heart. I wasn't looking to date again, but Daniel was different. A rugged veterinarian with kind eyes who actually understood animals. To my shock, Max didn't growl or bark when they met. He approached slowly, sniffing Daniel's outstretched hand while I held my breath. "He's magnificent," Daniel said, expertly examining Max's coat. "Such loyalty in his eyes. You can tell he adores you." Those words made me nervous. Could Daniel sense the depth of our connection? Yet Max seemed to accept him, allowing him to join our evening walks. We fell into an odd routine: movie nights with Max at our feet, weekend hikes where Daniel taught us about local wildlife. But in private, guilt gnawed at me. My intimate moments with Max became less frequent but more intense. Stolen afternoons while Daniel worked. I'd cry into Max's fur afterward, confused by my conflicting desires. My loyal companion would comfort me with gentle nuzzles, his amber eyes full of understanding. "I'll never leave you," I'd whisper. "No matter what happens with Daniel, you're my first love." A year ago, I never imagined allowing another human into our private sanctuary. But Daniel was different. I met him at my friend Kate's backyard barbecue, where he was treating her elderly retriever's arthritis. His gentle hands and quiet confidence with animals drew me in immediately. At first, I dodged his attempts to ask me out. The guilt of my secret intimacy with Max weighed heavily. But Daniel was persistent in the kindest way, leaving his card in case Max ever needed a checkup, bringing specialty treats when we'd bump into him at the dog park. The day he first came to our house, I was a nervous wreck. Max had driven away every other man, yet something extraordinary happened. Instead of his usual aggressive display, Max approached Daniel slowly, head slightly lowered, and sniffed his outstretched hand. "What a magnificent boy," Daniel murmured, his experienced fingers finding just the right spots behind Max's ears. "You can see the intelligence in his eyes. The bond between you two is beautiful." Those words made my heart race with anxiety. Could he somehow sense the true nature of our connection? But Daniel just smiled warmly, completely at ease with Max's protective nature. Gradually, Daniel became a regular part of our lives. His veterinary knowledge helped me understand Max even better, explaining his body language, teaching me new training techniques. On our group hikes, he'd point out medicinal plants and tell stories about wildlife encounters from his practice. "You two saved each other," he observed one evening, as Max lay contentedly between us on the couch. "It's rare to see such perfect trust between human and animal." If only he knew the full truth of those words. While Daniel brought normalcy and companionship to my life, my heart remained divided. Those stolen afternoon moments with Max became more precious, more desperate. The familiar jar in the kitchen called to me less frequently, but with greater intensity. After our private intimacies, I'd hold Max close, breathing in his musky scent while guilt and confusion warred inside me. His amber eyes never judged, only offered unconditional love and acceptance of my torn nature. Daniel represented everything I should want: stability, understanding, a chance at a conventional future. He even talked about us moving in together, getting Max a companion dog. The thought terrified me. How could I maintain my deepest connection while sharing a home with someone else? Tonight, watching Daniel sleep peacefully beside me while Max keeps his loyal vigil by the window, I realize I'm at a crossroads. Can I truly bridge these two worlds? Or must I choose between socially acceptable love and the primal bond that saved my soul? On our last night alone together, before Daniel was due to move in, tears streamed down my face as I held Max close. The familiar jar sat unopened on my bedside table, a symbol of what I had to leave behind. "You saved me," I whispered into his fur, breathing in his comforting scent one last time. "When I was broken and alone, you put me back together." Max sensed my emotional state, pressing his warm body against mine, as he always did when I cried. His amber eyes held such understanding, such acceptance of whatever I chose. One final time, I reached for the jar with trembling hands. Our intimate connection that night was bittersweet, knowing it would be our last. His gentle attention brought me to that familiar peak of pleasure, but this time my ecstasy was mixed with soft sobs. Afterward, Max curled protectively around me as always, his steady heartbeat soothing my aching soul. "I'll always love you differently," I murmured, "but we have to move forward." In the following weeks, I packed away certain items, hiding evidence of our special bond. The jar was buried deep in the trash. Yet Max's devotion never wavered. He accepted Daniel's increasing presence with grace, as if understanding this was best for me. Sometimes I still catch his knowing gaze in private moments, remembering what we shared. But we've found a new normal now. My beautiful boy remains my protector and confidant, while Daniel gives me the human love I need. Some nights I still cry into Max's fur, missing our deepest intimacy. But his gentle nuzzles remind me that our love transcends the physical. We'll always share a soul-deep connection that no one else could understand. That last night together, before Daniel would move in, my skin tingled with anticipation and sadness. Max's deep amber eyes watched me reach for the jar one final time, his tail softly thumping against the sheets. "Come here, my beautiful boy," I whispered. His warm breath against my skin made me shiver. That talented tongue that had brought me so much pleasure over our years together worked its magic once more. Each tender stroke sent electricity through my body, building that familiar tension. I arched and gasped, fingers tangling in his thick fur. The way he knew exactly how to touch me, how to drive me wild, no human could compare to his instinctive understanding of my needs. His powerful body pressed against mine as waves of pleasure crashed over me again and again. Afterwards, I cried into his fur, knowing we'd never share this intimacy again. His gentle whimpers and nuzzles comforted me as always. We fell asleep tangled together, his steady heartbeat matching mine. The next morning, I buried the empty jar deep in the trash, saying goodbye to that chapter of our life. Though our physical connection had to end, the soul-deep bond we shared would never fade. Max seemed to understand, accepting Daniel's presence with quiet dignity. Sometimes late at night, I still catch his knowing gaze and remember those passionate moments we shared. But we've found a new way forward, our love transforming into something society could accept while remaining uniquely ours. Daniel moved in on a sunny Saturday, his boxes mixing with my carefully sanitized space. I'd spent weeks erasing evidence of my past intimacies with Max. Certain sheets disappeared, specific items buried deep in garbage bags, taken far from home. That first night together as a proper household, I lay awake between them. Daniel's arm draped over my waist, while Max watched from his new bed across the room. Those amber eyes held such understanding, such acceptance of our evolution. Still, my body remembered his touch, his talented tongue that had brought such pleasure. I shivered at the memory. "Everything okay?" Daniel mumbled sleepily, pulling me closer. "Just adjusting," I whispered back, watching Max's tail thump softly against his bed. The following weeks brought new routines. Morning walks became a trio instead of our private communion. Max adapted gracefully, though sometimes during quiet moments alone, he'd press against me with that old familiar intensity. My heart would race, body responding to memories of our passionate past. During intimate moments with Daniel, Max would retreat to the living room, a gentleman's courtesy that made my chest ache with gratitude and guilt. Yet sometimes I'd catch those knowing eyes and flush hot, remembering how thoroughly my beautiful boy had once claimed me. The jar of peanut butter now stayed firmly in the kitchen cabinet, used only for occasional sandwiches. But every time I opened it, my fingers would tremble slightly, remembering those wild nights of abandoned pleasure.